Hello again and welcome back. This time to part 3 of our video regarding the stages of change and how we help our youngsters to transition through them. Once again, I'm Tom McIntyre and I'm not expecting that status to change anytime soon. When we last left off, we described and discussed the pre-contemplation and the contemplation stages. Let's return to the visual depiction of the model as it applies to our youngsters and their mentors, us. The young person has decided to some degree of certainty that he or she wishes to pursue a more socially acceptable behavior pattern. In that case, that young person needs to engage in preparations that will enhance the chances of success when action is eventually undertaken. Great! It's another success story for you. We now have a young individual who pledges to undertake positive change in the next few weeks. No doubt apprehension still exists, but planning and role-playing the desired actions will reduce the level of anxiety and provide some modicum of belief in oneself as he or she tests the waters, so to speak. Now at this point, session leader, I'll ask you in just a second to pause the program after I've stated a question that hopefully you'll reiterate and rephrase. How do we become involved in the preparation stage? What is our role? At this point, think why. That's your only cue. Go ahead, session leader, just take a second, see if some folks have some ideas as to how we get involved at this particular stage. Welcome back. We have to determine the why of the behavior, its purpose, its reason for existence. Now, why must we determine the why behind the aberrant behavior? That's right. If the new behavior fails to serve the same purpose, function, drive, reason for being, then the chances of adoption range somewhere between 0 and none, with a midpoint of zilch. Now, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know when I say that even if the proposed replacement does meet the same need, function, purpose, it must do so at least as well as the old ways and provide at least as much rewarding outcome, or relapses are guaranteed. We'll accomplish this task through a functional behavior assessment. I'm sure you're quite familiar with it. We do the ABC analysis, the antecedent behavior consequence analysis. We collect anecdotal notes as we observe the youngster in situ. We collect records, the test scores, examples of how this youngster has performed on various tasks, looking at the grade book. And we'll also want to go beyond the simplistic look at surface behavior into Dreiker's mistaken goals analysis. If you are unfamiliar with any of those 4 things that were mentioned, you can always find them on the website behavioradvisor.com. And because the drive to strive comes from within, we want the youngster to take the lead, of course with a little bit of prompting on our part. While we can offer advice when deemed necessary, the primary course of action is to lure the young one into organizing and clarifying matters in a way that makes the most sense to him or her. Our way of making sense of things may differ significantly from the manner in which the learner assembles the pieces. Here's a form from the Behavior Transformation Guide packet. We'll be using this form in just a minute or two, and then again at the end of the podcast as we look at a particular kid's case study. This form helps us to help kids organize their thoughts while giving us ingredients for our intervention soup. The third box down delineates the steps to follow. You'll find guidance for handling this section at behavioradvisor.com inside the Intervention Strategies tab. Scroll down the long list of intervention practices for the What It Is and How to Do It page on a procedure known as shaping. The other boxes help us to fully convey to the junior citizen that this change ain't gonna be easy. However, there are at-the-ready supports surrounding him or her that are available upon request. You might decide to add another box or two to the form depending on how you see the plan of action needing to develop. Got it? Great. Session leader. Let's get ready again to pause the video. In preparation for that break in the flow, I'd like everyone to bring to mind an intervention-resistant student. List the obstacles that might get in the way of his or her success in behavior change and complete as much of the form as possible, perhaps from your assumption of his or her perspective. Now, I realize that engaging in that mind meld process requires us to enter the headspace of our focus learner, but give it a go. It'll give us a better understanding of how the process plays out, realizing that although we can place ourselves in the shoes of another, it's still our own feet that we feel. To make a long story short, maybe it's too late for that, start with the obstacles box before working your way through other items. All right, session leader, please pause the video at this point and restart it when your form filling and group discussion has been completed. That's right. You're familiar with that adage that you gotta like the messenger if you're going to listen to the message. And so you've worked on developing a positive relationship with this youngster, and you've established trust bonds. And the youngster comes to you and says, perhaps in some high-level verbiage as we see here, the youngster comes to tell you it's time. He or she or other gender marker is ready to undertake that onerous challenge. So in the preparation stage, our role is to keep the motivation high, reassure the youngster that change is a worthy and an important goal, and encourage small initial steps through that shaping program toward the new behavior profile. Of course, we need to make certain that we're available when needed in order to provide that continued support and guidance. Continuing on, to use a sports analogy, it's practice, practice, practice in ever more realistic game situations. If you're interested, I have a hilarious but illustrative example of this increasingly more challenging role-playing sequence. If you'd like the audio version, email me at drmac@behavioradvisor.com. The word doctor is spelled out with 2 Q's. Just kidding. If the performance of the new skills is not up to snuff, determine whether it's a skill deficit or a performance deficit. If the lack of demonstration of the appropriate behavior is due to a lack of awareness or lack of practice with the subcomponents of the complex behavior, the skills, then we teach them. If the youngster possesses all the skills and is able to demonstrate the behavior, then we must find a more powerful motivator in order to convince the young person to perform those actions. Sometimes our mentee has the skills, but the situations become more realistic and anxiety builds and they get a bit befuddled. To reiterate, practice, practice, practice with debriefing sessions and do-overs, going over that role play again as needed. Which brings us back and forward to number 6. We review with the student all the possible places and situations in which the new behaviors could be tried out and would be beneficial to display. We select the least anxiety-provoking scenario, one that promises a successful outcome. This youngster is going to need early success in order to keep the needle on the motivation dial in the green zone. We then arrange the listing of other scenarios so that they are in order of increasing demand on the young person's emerging proficiency. Once one situation becomes comfortable to the youngster, positively recognize that progress and encourage him or her to attempt a new and more difficult challenge. Yes, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are made for. We encourage our young first mate to venture out into rougher waters. Let's back up the bus at this point, and then we'll make headway through these 6 steps that we've been talking about once again, looking this time at what might be said by us to the student. You, of course, will place these commentary styles into your own personal phraseology. So the youngster comes to you and says, I think I'm ready to try this out. And we say, super, you have made an important decision that's going to bring about a lot of positive benefits in your life. But then we talk about, change is never an easy process. What can we imagine might be some of the hurdles we're going to have to jump, some of the issues we're going to run across, some of the problems that might pop up? And then we talk about how we might deal with each one if they do pop up, although prevention always trumps reaction, so we're looking at ways to prevent those issues from arising. And then we help the youngster to identify individuals in his or her life who could provide them with assistance and with support. And so we talk with the youngster about, who do you know who would be very pleased to see you make these changes? How could those people help? How do we recruit them? Now, certainly I'm here to support you as needed, but has anything come up right now that you'd like to talk about? Anything in particular that you need me to do at this particular point so you're more fully motivated to move forward? If our plan A doesn't work, we're going to need a plan B. In number 4, we practice responses that can be used when the default plan of action falls flat. In this case scenario, my well-taught defensive statement didn't always work for the kids. Predator insulters would sometimes continue to make disparaging commentary about one's female family members, insisting that they did indeed know the mama, in the biblical meaning of coming to know someone. My former students and I then brainstormed a particularly effective way to handle this highly stressful public challenge to which one feels obligated to defend the family honor. When confronted with an accusatory follow-up mother insult, they would first reply, "I don't play house." That's the term they used in their neighborhood. It might be called rankin' moms, playing the dozens, or have no name at all in your part of this blue-green orb. If the insulters continued, the default response was akin to, like I said, man, I don't play to dozens. I'm too dang good. I'd have you down on your knees crying like a baby. And then they'd leave the situation looking good with the audience's whoa on their side. And as they exited victorious, they'd turn around and say, you can thank me later for not embarrassing you. For this final send-off in step 5, we still need to be available PRN, the medical scribble for as needed. Do be empathetic if the youngster is rather anxious and somewhat reticent to go it alone, so to speak, at this point. Do we have the time to engage in some variations of practice possibilities? Make it more realistic. Talk about if plan B doesn't work, then what's plan C? It's better to start late on the behavior change with a kid who's well prepared and more confident and feeling more fully prepared for what might transpire. Intriguing question. Let's investigate it. Hello, session leader. It's nearly time to pause the video yet again so that our group can consider how we would promote and support the skill and the motivation for the youngster to undertake the action stage. During our conversation, we'll think about the programs we've used or witnessed, interventions that we've found to be effective, instructional practices that we've used, and so forth. When you've completed your discussion, restart the video. Mr. or Madame Session Leader, now please. Here's a list of approaches that I've found to be helpful in the past. All of them are described on behavioradvisor.com, and I suspect that your list will vary somewhat from mine. Yes, teaching the social skills that are needed by this youngster. Sometimes the skill that was needed by my kids was managing their anger, and we had a certain curriculum for that. I'm a big proponent of the circle of courage. If you're unfamiliar with it, again, you can find it on behavioradvisor.com. And it's a character education model. I've developed materials that will assist in identifying which areas of character are distorted or absent or strong, and how to go about building those parts of character. You can find that again, behavioradvisor.com. Repeated practice, spacing out our sessions, trying variations on the theme, but making sure they haven't forgot how to do it, challenging them at various points throughout the months. Practicing new ways in parts, whether it's task analysis, breaking down a complex behavior into the steps to be followed one after another, or a more general shaping, sometimes called desensitization program for kids with anxiety. But shaping is more general. We set a goal, and once that goal is accomplished, we set a more difficult goal. Giving them honest feedback, but not harsh feedback. We want to give them criticism that helps, not hurts. And so we can give them a criticism sandwich where we start out with something positive, noticing some progress, some effort, making some constructive criticism, not just what was done wrong, but what could be done in its place, followed by some positivity. We encourage them, hearing, I believe in you. I know you can do it. The two of us teaming up together, this is going to be a successful endeavor. We think encouragement may be even more intensive, motivating than praise. And you'll also want to check out praise. There's 13, 14 different types that have been identified, and only 2, maybe 3, actually promote the behavior that we're positively recognizing. Most are ineffective, most styles of praise. Some are even counterproductive, working against the display of that action again in the future. Self-monitoring, where the kid is involved in keeping track of his or her own behavior, developing self-management, self-awareness of the behavior, and self-management of the behavior. And perhaps the most powerful procedure we have, other than developing great relationships with kids, talking about just procedures per se, differential reinforcement and its different variations. You'll want to check those out again at behavioradvisor.com. And you'll remember stage 6, where we have identified a number of situations in which showing this new behavior would be beneficial, have a payoff for the youngster, and we place them in order from the most likely to be accomplished right now at this point to ones that would be more difficult, in which would need more skill and more proficiency. All right, we've got some traction as we move into action. Yes, let's take a deeper dive into the action stage. It's time for our protege to put the preparation into real-life practice. His or her level of confidence will probably be situated somewhere on the apprehension continuum, from strong reticence to tigress-like pouncing upon the opportunity. How do we support the effort? By being there if and when we are needed. We show our interest in their comfort and competence by asking questions like, Session leader, in just a moment, I'll be asking you to pause our video and have us think about which questions we might ask during a scheduled meeting with our pupil, or perhaps when we find a few minutes to talk with him or her in the lunchroom, hallway, or on the grounds outside. Queries that attempt to ascertain how the youngster is doing at that particular point in time, or how we might assist him or her in experiencing social and/or behavioral success. Remember that our student is in the phase when he or she is attempting to display a new behavior when certain circumstances present themselves. So our task at this point in the presentation is to ponder, which queries might we inquire of the youth? Session leader, please pause the video now, starting it again when the discussion is complete. I suspect that you fine folks have constructed similar questions to those we're going to see on the screen. Here are the ones that I've asked kids when they have taken our social skills role-playing practice to the next step, out there into the real social world. Wow, success on some level. Kudos to everyone who has worked so hard to bring the youngster into the action stage. Now, we want to make certain that this new way of acting and reacting continues. Onward to the maintenance stage. Well, yes, individuals might be on the right behavioral track, but are they going in the right direction? If you just sit there on the rail, you'll be on the right path, but get nowhere. Indeed, progress monitoring doesn't stop after a week of success. Solidifying new habitual behaviors can take months, even years, to be fully assured of lifelong continuation. Esteemed session leader, it's about time to, once again, pause the video as you and your valued colleagues discuss ways in which we can support the youngster's fragile new identity. How do we minimize the chances of a return to the old ways and enhance the chances of a continued concerted pursuit and solidification of the new ways of behaving? Which school-based supports can be put into place? Which self-assessments can be utilized in order to inform the youngster as to how he or she is handling the increased responsibility? How can we fade out our supports while still having them available if the need arises? How can we reduce our role while making it evident to the youngster that he or she can call on us when needed? Let's now devise our maintenance stage supports. Esteemed session leader, now's the time. Please pause the video and restart it when the discussion has been concluded. There often exists some undefined generalized anxiety, even in the successful student. Yeah, it's that fear of sliding back down the way we came once we've chugged up the incline and reached the edge of the proficiency plateau. As the old saying goes, and now it's applied to that sense of uncertainty even when having achieved success, when you put your ear to the railroad track, you can hear something coming, but you don't know from which direction. Or, allow me to regale you with yet another railroad analogy about the fear of backsliding. Our kids' anxiety is akin to fear that the light at the end of the tunnel might be an oncoming locomotive. But enough railroad comparisons already. I'll get off this sidetrack and back up our way to our next whistle stop. Oops, I think I just dropped my brain. At this stage, we still engage in frequent check-in and assessments of comfort and competence, fading them out in frequency as is indicated. We do meet as necessary, as these conversations are essential to support and maintenance of the replacement behaviors. Relapses are no stranger to the behavior change process. In fact, they are frequent guests. They are to be expected when least expected. Whether the youngster drops down one stage or all the way back to the initial behavior pattern, doing so brings with it the emotional overtones of disappointment, disgust, and self-doubt. It seems that most people recycle through the stages of change several times before the change becomes fully established. So it's important to make the young one aware that failure is common, but can be made temporary and less frequent with persistence and, that's right, practice, practice, practice. My dear session leader, in just a moment I'm going to ask you to, again, pause the video so that those of us gathered here today can think of some ways that we can reassure and remotivate demoralized youngsters who have stumbled. How do we support youngsters who now doubt whether they can be successful in the next attempt? Please pause the video now and restart it after folks have devised and shared their ideas to the larger group. Because we need to fully involve our young understudy in his or her own life path decisions, we'll want to make full use of probing questions versus admonitions and advice-filled lectures. What inquiries can you formulate for possible use in the post-relapse conversation? Phrase the questions in such a way that they hint that the setback is temporary and future re-engagement is worthwhile. As our session leader moves to pause the video, remember that you'll be creating non-condescending questions that will seek out information that helps us to better understand what happened and what is needed for the youngster's success. You'll then share the wealth with your colleagues. Session leader, please pause the video at this point so our group can engage in this final exercise. Restart it again after the conversation is ended. As I'm certain you discovered in the sharing of the questions that you folks devised, our concerned and caring interrogation would play out with questions that are akin to these. Our responsibilities continue on even when the youngster's been successful. In fact, we'll be walking with that youth for an expansive time. During that time, we will continue to work on helping that youngster to feel that internal pride of accomplishment and making progress toward positive behavior change. We bring up the topic of what would we do if relapse came into the picture. We do have some ideas to add to our discussion that can be found in the Behavior Transformation Guide. Thank you for that observation, Mr. Edison. And we'll reassure the youngster that we are there to provide a leg up to help them as they attempt to accomplish the challenge once again. You fine folks have no doubt devised different ways to convey the message that you haven't failed. Your success has simply been postponed. I realize that some of the famous figures shown here are repeated. It's a holdover from my days of working with the Department of Redundancy Department. You'll get that one on your way home. Our mission, our prime directive, is to help the kid get back on the horse, so to speak. For those kids to get back up on the horse that just bucked them off often requires that they have time to recover, to re-energize before replanning and re-engaging. They are indeed fortunate to have you there to give them a leg to get back up on that steed. This time, better prepared to ride that equine over and around life's obstacles. Behavior change is a difficult, bump-filled uphill climb. Stumbling is to be expected. Belittlement, chastisement, naysaying, they're all counterproductive to motivating further attempts at behavioral betterment. As we help to pick up the pieces, we examine each one, determine which pillar supported the new action pattern for an amount of time. How do we strengthen it or change it out for something sturdier? Which factors lit the fuse to the destruction of the new ways of behaving? How do we eliminate or counter them in any upcoming re-engagements? Relapse has happened. But what is the status of the motivation or demoralization at this point? Whether our protege wants to get right back in the game or wishes to sit out right now, we want to engage him or her in a debriefing and an analysis of events that transpired and reflect upon what was and can be learned from this regrettable experience. That conversation gives us essential information that can help us to coach our life player to future success. The BARC, the Behavior Assessment of Readiness to Change, a section of the Behavior Transformation Guide, holds a vast number of interventions for addressing this stage of the change model. It also includes coping strategies for releasing the worry and the emotional pressure that are associated with change. Here we see the readiness model in a rather different form than a stepwise version we've been using thus far. With regard to falling back into past behavior patterns, we want to pay special attention here to the dashed line spiral in the middle of this model. It reminds us that we can learn from our experiences and improve with each attempt. Each failure is viewed as an encounter with learning that provides one with life experiences that can help one live that life better. Conversation also ensues when the youngster is experiencing success. We ask information-seeking assessment questions such as, how are you managing to continue doing this? What's the secret of your success at the moment? And how can we assist you? What would help you move to even a greater degree and echelon of success? One size fits all. It's a lie in fashion and it's a lie in education. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about academics or behavior. However, there are a few generalities, some final takeaways from our time together. The first part of changing one's ways is recognizing that they need to be changed. The Behavior Transformation Guide provides materials for accomplishing this initial goal and the others that follow. And you gotta like the messenger if you're going to listen to the message. Relationships are built on common experiences, time together, reputation, and being trustworthy. They may seem to be placing the cart before the horse, but even if the young ones aren't quite ready to use the skills, having them in their repertoire, excuse my French, for future use is a good idea. As the old saying goes, knowledge is power, and knowing that others have been in their place and move forward is comforting. Knowing where they're located now, where they're going, and how they're going to get there provides a sense of confidence, knowing that there's a plan and someone to help them achieve it. They know the path to be traveled, making the chances of success greater. Change is possible, especially when someone like you is involved. And a wonderful side effect benefit is that we too will improve with each effort that we exert, as we help kids replace counterproductive behavior patterns with proficiency in socially appropriate actions. Thanks for all you do for kids. You've earned a few more points toward a positive afterlife. See you there. I trust that this video has facilitated the wrapping of your brain around the readiness model and helped you to more fully understand the general approaches for supporting youngsters in their positive behavior change efforts. To take you and your facility to the apex, the summit of the professional peak, consider obtaining the Behavior Transformation Guide with its multiple components: a refresher document regarding the model, the BARC, the Behavior Assessment of Readiness for Change, which is the adult rating scale, the READY report, that is the self-assessment by the student, and a listing of suggested interventions for moving further within and through each of the stages. A great number of those listed interventions are hyperlinked to my other web pages, videos, and materials that provide directions for using those strategies. In order to be optimally effective in helping our misguided youngsters change their ways for the better, we need to have them beside us, hand in hand, on the behavior change team. The process of change is much more rewarding when all involved parties work together. They work with rather than against each other, when we're all pulling in the same direction. The instruments and material in the Behavior Transformation Guide provide you with both information and influence. You now have a toolkit for building positive behavior patterns or restoring malfunctioning ones to tip-top condition. I wish you good fortune in your noble and admirable efforts. If you are presently in a group session with the Behavior Transformation Guide materials ready, your facilitator will soon lead a second part of this workshop in which you'll be applying the BTG materials to a case study of a troubled and troubling 12-year-old boy who's been diagnosed with both oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder. Perhaps another youngster's case study will be available. You'll become familiar with this hypothetical student via documents and video clips before applying the model and materials in your practice session. Hey, wait, it's not going to be like that. The next part of our session will be challenging, engaging, and worthwhile, truly. Session leader, thank you for your diligence to task. Once again, thanks for joining me today. I trust the information has been illuminating and informative and will be useful in your important work with children and youth who struggle with emotional and behavioral challenges. Thank goodness that they have someone like you on their side. This is Tom McIntyre, Dr. Mac, signing off. Good day.